this kind of power, this kind of challenge, this kind of flying, crashing feeling. When you decide to get serious, there's only one place to come, the games of Super Nintendo. No one else creates this kind of experience, because no one else creates these kinds of games. Now you're playing with power, superpower.
Hello and welcome to yet another trip down the digital memory lane with ReplayRetro. I'm Matt, and on today's show we take a look at the little grey box I grew up with as we explore the history of the 16-bit Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES to those of us cool enough to have grown up in the early 90s. Now, in the third generation, Nintendo had already established themselves as the dominant force in video games, using good marketing, clever developer controls and solid hardware to give the original Nintendo Entertainment System the undisputed top spot in the 8-bit race. But as the 90s loomed on the horizon, Sega entered the fourth generation with their 16-bit Mega Drive and instantly started tearing into Nintendo's market share, while NEC's TurboGrafx-16 also worked on etching out its own chunk of the market based on their PC Engine hardware. Now, while Nintendo certainly weren't in a rush to spend money on new hardware, they also weren't stupid, and they didn't like seeing their market dominance slipping away to their biggest rival. So the company turned to its research and development team too, headed by Masayuki Umura, to create their next generation hardware, just as they had done with the previous generation. And in 1990 the Super Famicom launched in Japan, the name simply indicating that this was the Super version of the system that you already loved. A naming style which was continued, at least in spirit, by the Nintendo 64 codename Ultra. The system took another year to reach the West, and it would be 1992 before Europeans got their hands on the new hardware, by which time the Mega Drive already had a 2-year head start and was taking full advantage of it. This was helped by the fact that the Sega system was also slightly cheaper than Nintendo and was marketed as being cooler, faster and better than anything Nintendo had to offer. But regardless of this, the Japanese market simply loved Nintendo, and the system soon snatched the top spot back from Sega. Now, in terms of which is the more powerful machine, it really depends on what you look at. For example, the Super Nintendo features a comparatively weedy 3.58 MHz processor compared to the 7.6 MHz of the Sega machine. However, the Nintendo hardware had a much more capable sound chip designed by audio expert Sony, who would eventually use an upgraded version of the chip in their own console years later. The SNES also has twice the RAM of its closest competitor, as well as far more capable graphics architecture, but it would be the Mode 7 graphics system that really proved to be the ace up Nintendo's sleeve. Mode 7 was one of 8 different modes used for displaying backgrounds on the Super Nintendo, and it allowed for a variety of never-before-seen effects, such as rotating and scaling of the background layer. This could be used to create the illusion of perspective, and thus allowed a sort of pseudo-3D on hardware designed for 2D gaming. Launch title F-Zero is a great demonstration of the Mode 7 technology, while later on Super Mario Kart proved what it could do, even allowing for foreground sprites to appear to fall behind the background layer. The Mega Drive wouldn't be capable of these effects until the Mega CD came along to boost up the hardware, but that meant that this feature would only be available to people who bought that expensive add-on. Special chips included in some games further improved the graphics of the SNES, such as the Super FX chip used in Starwing, which could manipulate up to 100 polygons a second, kickstarting the rise of polygon-based graphics that would form the backbone of the 5th console generation. However, as we've discovered on this show many times before, great graphics are nothing without great games. And if there was one thing the Mega Drive had in abundance, it was great games. In the previous generation, Nintendo had locked down developers using contracts, hardware trickery, and even fear, ensuring that only their console got the greatest games. But this time, things were different. While stalwarts like Capcom and Square stood firmly by Nintendo, Others, like Acclaim, dared to challenge the hardware giant by releasing games for both systems, and even daring to give the Mega Drive exclusive releases. Suddenly, Nintendo's ability to keep a tight grip on developers and their games seemed to be gone. Maybe this time they wouldn't be able to brush off Sega quite as easily as they had before. Their family-friendly policy would also hurt the popularity of their games when in 1993 the hugely popular arcade fighter Mortal Kombat made its way to the home consoles. While the Mega Drive version stayed true to the arcade by leaving in the blood and gore that made the game so popular, the SNES version was censored to make it more suitable for children, and as a result the Mega Drive version outsold the SNES version by 3-1. However, the enormous cast of much-loved characters and highly talented designers available to Nintendo meant that the system also had its fair share of must-play exclusive games, and for the most part, the enhanced graphics of the console kept cross-platform games looking their best on Nintendo, and the company soon found itself pulling back its market share. Later, both Sega and NEC would fight back with CD add-ons for their consoles, bringing more data storage and even full-motion video to the fight. And for a while, Nintendo too considered a CD-based add-on for their machine, but after falling out with Sony, and eventually scrapping a deal with Philips, the add-on never appeared. Nintendo stuck with expensive cartridges, increasing the size available to fend off CDs, and the failure of the Mega CD seemed to prove them right. But the march of technology would later be their stumbling block, as CDs went on to become the preferred storage medium for games. If anyone doubted Nintendo's ability to keep pace though, they'd soon have their fears put to rest, as in 1994, UK-based developer Rare released Donkey Kong Country, using powerful hardware to create 3D models converted into stunning 2D sprites, proving that the 16-bit Nintendo was more than capable of putting up a fight against early 32-bit challengers, including the Panasonic 3DO and Sega Saturn. The game went on to become the second highest selling title behind only Mario himself, and in the same year the Super Game Boy adapter allowed gamers to play their Game Boy games on the big screen, greatly increasing the library of titles available. While in '95, Japan was treated to the Satellaview, which attached to the underside of the Super Famicom and allowed for the downloading of game updates, whole games, and even let gamers enter competitions to win prizes. But unfortunately, this fantastic device was never released in the West. Now let's take a look at the hardware itself, and just a few of the games. Here we have two of the main versions of the Super Nintendo hardware then, the American on this side, and my original PAL system here. The Japanese one, very similar to the PAL, the mouldings are all the same, just obviously different text on them is pretty much all that changes. While the American one is a complete redesign. I'm not entirely sure why Nintendo felt America would want this kind of chunkier, more square design, but I'm sure that that's just how they felt it was necessary to go. As you can see, both machines are quite yellowed, which, as anyone that collects retro gaming hardware will know, is a very, very, very common thing for old plastics to yellow. I may retro-bright them at some point this summer to get them nice and clean and restored, so they might look a little bit better soon, but for now they are as they are in their lovely played with and worn condition. We'll take a look at the PAL system here first. It's quite nice, it's quite sleek, especially in comparison to the American system. Very simple. You have obviously your cartridge port on the top here, clearly labelled PAL version. Little Super Nintendo logo. Big eject button for popping those cartridges out and seeing how high you can make them fly. Reset button and your power on off, which obviously links into the LED for power. On the front you have two controller ports, labelled player 1 and player 2 obviously. The sides give you pretty much nothing. On the back you have the Nintendo AV multi-out, which is the same one used by the Nintendo 64. You also have an RF out for TVs that will use RF instead, and you have the socket for the AC adapter to get this beast powered up. You also have some lovely venting there to help get the heat out. Obviously consoles back then didn't need as much venting as our current stuff. Underneath then you have some feet, mine stained by blue tack, I think. An extension cover here, which would have been, I imagine, for the CD attachment, had it ever happened. Or if the Satellaview had ever come out over here, that would have gone in there as well. And then just the usual labels that you'd expect to find. Weirdly, it looks like there's supposed to be some labels here, but there never has been. It's not that these have come off. As far as I remember, there's never been any labelling on there. It's a lovely, solid feeling system. It really does feel like it's well built and could stand up to life quite well. Let's have a look at the American one then. Different colour scheme. It's all grey and purple for your big power button there, and for your reset button. Your eject button is sunk in and pops up when a cartridge is in, like that. Cartridge port is actually slightly wider. You'll see why in a moment. Controller ports are the same. Power LED has moved there. Sides, again, nothing on them. Nice embossed Nintendo logo over here. At the back, you have a lovely picture of Mario with a screwdriver for the service number. Again, that multi-out, the RF out, and the power socket are on the back there. And you also get the channel switch, as is common on quite a lot of American systems, to help them switch between channel 3 and 4. I believe that's because in various states, various channels are used or not used, and so that switch is there so that you can find an empty channel. That's what I believe it's for anyway. On the back of this one, more of the sticker space is used, although not that sticker space this time. And again, we find the extension port exactly the same. Weirdly, the plastic for this extension port, not faded at all. Must be to do with the different dyes, perhaps, used. Rubber feet, again, as you would expect. That's your two main versions of the hardware. There is also a junior version. The games look, again, very different for each system. You have the American games on this side. This is Super Street Fighter. No, this is just Street Fighter 2 Turbo, not Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. There's so many different versions of Street Fighter and Street Fighter Turbo, it's just unreal. You can see here that the American cartridges are wider than the PAL cartridges and will not fit in a PAL system. And likewise, these ones are fatter, but they will just about fit into an American one, but they won't play, as far as I'm aware. This is Killer Instinct, the PAL version. It's a black cartridge, but not all the cartridges were black. Most of them were the grey. It just varied depending on certain games. I think Maximum Carnage, Spider-Man Maximum Carnage, is a red cartridge, for example. And the cartridges pop into the top there on their respective systems and are ejected like that. Or like that. That one didn't fly out. I think the springs in that ejector are a little bit past it. Pop them back in there and we'll take a quick look at the control pad. The control pads are pretty much the same regardless of where you are. I think the American one looks slightly bigger. Put them back to back. Yeah, not a lot in it, but it does look slightly bigger. D-pad, select, start, Y, B, X and A. You'll notice that the colour schemes again are different based on the region. The American one, they're using the two shades of purple, or lilac and purple, whatever you want to call it, while the PAL one uses colours and has the Super Nintendo logo there. Nothing interesting on the back, pretty much just the same. Nice amount of cord leading down to the plugs. And these controllers can be used on either, it doesn't really matter which system you use them on. They plug in quite nicely there, but it doesn't matter which one you use them on, it is literally just the colour schemes that are different. You also have shoulder buttons. I believe this is the first system to introduce shoulder buttons, and it probably started the button war, in my opinion, because obviously the NES and the Master System both had two buttons. Now we suddenly see that the Mega Drive had released a third button, and so Nintendo upped their game by adding a fourth button and two shoulder buttons. Eventually, Sega released a 6-button pad for the Mega Drive, so the button war just went on and on until obviously the Jaguar came along and brought back telephone keypad style buttons. But that's a basic look at the hardware, so now let's take a look at a few of the games. I'm going to apologise in advance for the glare. It's a really sunny day, but filming the screen genuinely is the best way to record this with audio. As it's just said, this is Killer Instinct, in my opinion, one of the greatest fighters of all time, alongside Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. Often gets forgotten about alongside those two, but it's a brilliant game. Fantastic cast of characters to choose from. I will of course be Glacius. It's an arcade fighter, and graphically it is stunning for a 16-bit system. To me, this game highlights the leap from the 8-bit NES to the 16-bit Super Nintendo. Now I'm just going to be button mashing, I can't remember any of the combos, but this game has a lot of moves available, unique to each character, like you would expect from a quality fighter. A lot of you will know it from the Xbox One, where it's recently come back, an all-new version of Killer Instinct. To me, its best incarnation would be Killer Instinct 2, the arcade, or Killer Instinct Gold on the N64, but this is an amazingly impressive game. This is UK studio Rare, again, who were responsible for Donkey Kong Country. And it just shows what you can do with the right effort. There you go, victory for button mashing. This game is just incredible. I love Killer Instinct. To me, if I could only pick one, either Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, or Killer Instinct. I know this is going to sound blasphemous to a lot of people, but for me it would be Killer Instinct every time. I remember Riptor's quite fast. Remember when I was in primary school, me and a friend used to play this non-stop. Although I think it might have been the N64 version actually that we played. Ooh, that wasn't good. But yeah, that is Killer Instinct. A fantastic game, an absolutely fantastic game. Graphically amazing. Look at the detail in the background, look at the detail in the characters. Fantastic. Next up then is Super Mario World. Yes, it's an obvious game to pick, a Mario title, but it's a great title. Oh, of course all my data has been forgotten over time. I remember first playing this in a garage while waiting for my dad's MOT to be sorted, because the garage had a Super Nintendo and Super Mario World. Yes, I get it. Skip. How do I skip? There we go. As you can see from the layout, it's like Super Mario Bros. 3 in that there is a map to follow. And I can't believe I just ran straight into Bullet Bill. Let's see if we can do that again, only less embarrassingly, without the running into Bullet Bill. Yeah, I got the coin this time. I remember one of the big advantages of this was you could carry a second power-up in that little empty box on the top of the screen. Either so that you could switch to it whenever you want. Ah, there you go, so I'll be able to store this mushroom. There you go, so now if I want to use that, I think I press select. And it will come to me, or it will come to me if I lose. Ah, there you go, because I lost my mushroom, it came to me. Oh, come on! What I love about this game is it is so colourful. That's a save point, by the way. Yeah, there you go, you can take an extra item. It's just so colourful. The original Mario games on the NES set the tone for cartoony, awesome graphics. And then this. Just look at it, it's so bright. How can video games be blamed for violence? Other than maybe fireball-related deaths. But how can you blame video games for violence when this is a thing? Oh god, I used to hate these guys. You can't kill them. Oh, you can. Haha! Level complete. Super Mario World. A brilliant game. Absolutely brilliant. I think there is a version of All Stars that includes it as well. Last up then we have Race Driving by Tengen, which is an Atari company. This game had an incredibly complicated arcade cabinet that had a key and gear shift and clutch, and I remember using it at one point when I was very little and not being able to work it. Wow, look at the stunt track. I couldn't work the cabinet at all because I didn't know how a clutch worked. I was like tiny. I don't know how to work a clutch. Drive. There we go. Oh wow, I don't remember this looking like this. Oh god. Ah! Break, break, break. No, 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 no. Ah, nads. Wow, I bounced off that house quite a lot. Like the instant replay. Look at that bang noise is quite severe. I'm definitely dead. That was a fireball and a half. Okay, let's see if we can not die for a second. See if we can make it to one of the stunts. No, 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 no. Get back on the road, get back on the road, get back on the road. This is very difficult to control. I'm not just rubbish. Honest, gov. I promise. Oh shit. I had to swerve to avoid that car after landing. Gah! Oh, this can't end well. Ah, nads. Graphically, this is quite yeah, I'm definitely dead there. It's going to be a fireball again. Yeah, I'm dead. Graphically, this is quite basic, I suppose. It's not the best racer out there, obviously, because, you know, Mario Kart is a thing. Brake, brake, brake. Don't go flying over. No! Ah, to hell with this. In 1998, the Super Famicom Junior and the Super Nintendo Junior were released in Japan and America. Sharp also released a 21-inch television with built-in SNES hardware, which, although demonstrated at the European Computer Trade Show in London, was never actually released outside of Japan, where games continued to be developed until the year 2000, with many of the final titles being delivered by Satellaview rather than the standard cartridges. However, by the end of the year, the service had gone dark, and the Super Nintendo was officially finished. Having sold around 49 million units, the SNES did defeat Sega overall, but in Europe the margins were extremely tight, with the Mega Drive even managing to outsell Nintendo in many regions. Nintendo's crown had certainly been loosened by the 16-bit battle. However, their reliance on and support of just one piece of hardware, as opposed to Sega's crazy release schedule of expensive add-ons and new hardware, gave them their final victory, as faith in Sega was shattered. These days, Super Nintendo hardware and software can be expensive to pick up due to rising levels of interest. However, flash carts do allow for a slightly less than legal, but very handy way to play all the games on the original hardware, as well as providing access to the active homebrew scene still making games for the console. There's also a selection of Super Nintendo games available on the Wii and Wii U via the Virtual Console, as well as a variety of Mega Drive games too. So there are certainly plenty of ways for you to have a look at both, and then make up your own mind about what tends to be the most controversial era of the console wars, as I'm sure the comments below will now demonstrate. That's all we've got time for on this week's show, but be sure to follow us on Twitter or Facebook at the links below, and come back next time for another blast from the past on Replay Retro. Thanks for watching.